Hey everyone, today we are diving deep into a branch of early Christianity that you've probably never heard of. It's a tradition that thrived for 1,000 years all across Asia, and it had a surprisingly different and honestly maybe a more profound take on what it actually means to be human.
What if I told you that our mortality wasn't a punishment, but actually our starting point? Or that our purpose isn't just to rule the earth, but to literally hold the entire cosmos together? Well, a group of ancient thinkers asked these exact questions, and believe me, their answers might just change how you see, well, everything.
So here's our roadmap for this journey. We're going to look at where this tradition came from, how they thought, which is key, and then what they believed about our bodies, our purpose, and our real place in the universe. And then we'll wrap up by looking at why these ancient ideas still matter so much today.
All right, so to really get this unique tradition, we have to start with geography. We have to understand where it was born. The Syrian Orient, a region that was caught in a constant epic tug of war.
I want you to just imagine this for a second. You're part of a minority group living right on the border between two massive superpowers, the Roman and Persian empires. You are constantly navigating shifting political lines, trying to maintain your own identity, like a cultural island against these two giant waves of influence. That's the world that gave birth to Syrian Christianity. And being squeezed between these giants actually had a surprising benefit. It allowed them to develop their own very distinct Semitic way of thinking. So unlike the Christianity that was growing up in the Greco-Roman West, their ideas were shaped way more by their roots in Palestinian Judaism. Thinkers like Ephraim and Theodore of Mopsuestia created this theological tradition that was so powerful, so compelling, that it became the version of Christianity that spread all the way across Asia for 1,000 years.
And this, right here, this brings us to the absolute core of what makes them so different. It's not just what they believed, it's how they thought about it. This is basically the decoder ring to their entire worldview. You can really see the fork in the road on this slide. On one hand, you've got the Western thinkers. They're heavily influenced by Greek philosophy, trying to define God and reality with this strict, precise logic. But the Syrians, they took a totally different path. They focused on activity, on how things appear and manifest in the world. They weren't trying to define God's essence. They were trying to understand God by seeing his symbols and his work in the world all around them.
So what was their main tool? It wasn't the philosophical textbook, it was poetry. For these poet theologians like Ephraim the Syrian, whose hymns on paradise are just masterpieces, poetry wasn't just some decorative, pretty language. No, it was the main vehicle for doing theology. It was their way of exploring the deep mysteries of God through symbol, narrative, and feeling.
Okay, so where does this poetic, symbolic way of thinking lead them? Well, it leads them right here, to some truly startling and beautiful conclusions about you and me.
Now, a core idea in both Judaism and Christianity is the imago Dei, this belief that humans are made in God's image. But what does that image actually mean? For a lot of thinkers, especially in the West, it was our soul, our ability to reason. But the Syrian thinkers, they pushed back on that.
And their logic was actually brilliantly simple. First, they said an image has to be visible, right? So the soul, being invisible, can't be the whole picture. Second, they pointed out that angels have reason and intellect, maybe even more than us, but the scriptures never call them the image of God. So this led them to a really powerful conclusion. The imago Dei must be the whole person, the complete, inseparable union of body and soul. For them, our physical bodies are not some prison for the soul. They are an absolutely essential part of how we reflect the divine.
They also just kept it simple. In a world full of these really complex philosophical theories about humans having multiple parts to their soul, they held to a much cleaner view. For them, humans are a simple dichotomy. One soul, one body, divinely joined together. That's it. Okay, now let's talk about the big story of humanity. Most of us, right, are probably familiar with this three-stage version. It goes like this. We were created immortal, then we sinned and became mortal, and now we hope to become immortal again. It's a story about loss and, hopefully, restoration.
But Theodore of Mopsuestia comes along and just flips the entire script. For him, humanity was created mortal from day one. Immortality wasn't something we lost, it was the goal we were always meant to grow towards. Suddenly, our story isn't about regaining a lost past, it's about achieving a promised future. It's a total game changer.
And for Theodore, this wasn't just some minor theological tweak. His reasoning was rooted in a deep, deep concern for the justice of God. He argued, think about it, It would seem kind of unjust for a loving God to give this incredible gift of immortality and then just snatch it away because of a single mistake. By creating us mortal, with the potential for immortality, God's character remains perfectly just, loving, and consistent.
So, if we were created mortal and meant to grow, then what was our ultimate purpose? What are we here for? And this question leads us to their most grand, most cosmic vision of humanity's role in everything.
They believe that humanity was created to be the bond of the universe. Just let that phrase sink in for a second. The bond of the universe. In this view, we aren't just a species on a planet. We are the very place where the two halves of reality, the spiritual invisible world and the physical visible world, are literally joined together.
And they had this brilliant metaphor to explain it. Imagine a king who builds a magnificent city. Then, in the very center of that city, he places a living, breathing statue of himself. Not to be used or exploited, but to be honored as his living representative. That statue, that's us. We are placed in the center of creation as a living symbol of the Creator's loving authority.
So our purpose is just immense. We are the priests of creation, gathering up all its praise and offering it to God. We are God's viceroys, revealing His nature to the rest of the cosmos. In our very being, spirit and matter are reconciled. In this view, humans are the keystone in the arch of the entire universe. That gives us a purpose that is even greater than that of the angels.
So what can we take away from this incredibly powerful and poetic vision of humanity? What do these ancient ideas have to say to us, right here in our modern world?
Let's just quickly recap the big ideas. First, we have a faith that values poetry and symbol just as much as it values logic. Second, an embodied faith, one that says our physical bodies are good, valuable, and essential to our divine image. Third, a hopeful story, where mortality is our starting block, not our punishment. And finally, a massive cosmic purpose that places us at the very heart of reality, as the bond of the universe.
So, I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. How might our lives, our relationships with each other, and our relationship with our planet, how might all of that change if we truly saw ourselves not as consumers or inhabitants, but as the sacred bond holding the entire universe together?